Top here, and these are 100 discoveries from ancient cities that rewrote history. The mystery of the Giraffe civilization. In Iran, in the ancient city of Giraffe, archaeologists discovered unique artifacts. These finds, which are over 5,000 years old, are clay and stone items with images of unusual creatures and symbols. Particular attention is drawn to figures with elongated heads and large eyes, which resemble descriptions of extraterrestrial beings. The images on the artifacts of the Giraffe civilization are so unique and different from other known ancient cultures that some researchers have put forward the hypothesis of possible contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations. These hypotheses are based on the idea that ancient artists might have depicted what they saw or heard about. The findings also include complex geometric patterns and symbols that have not yet been deciphered. This only adds to the mystery of this ancient culture. The Giraffe civilization, thanks to its mysterious artifacts, attracts the attention not only of archaeologists, but also of enthusiasts of mysticism and the unexplained. Melted steps. The staircase in the Temple of Hathor in Dendera raises many questions among archaeologists and researchers. These steps, located in one of the best preserved temples of ancient Egypt, look as if they were exposed to incredibly high temperatures, which could have caused their deformation and partial melting. Unusual bends and sunken areas can be seen on the surface of the steps, which are not typical for ordinary wear of stone structures. There is erosion. Several theories attempt to explain this phenomenon. One of the hypotheses suggests that the steps may have been damaged as a result of some unknown thermal impact, such as ritual fires or processes related to ancient technologies. Another theory points to possible construction errors. If the stones for the steps were formed directly on site from a liquid mixture, then interrupting the hardening process could have led to an incorrect shape and softness of the material. Scientists are still studying this phenomenon, another mystery added to the rich heritage of ancient Egypt. Egypt and the swastika. The more I studied the archives about the Unanswered, the clearer it became. The Nazis were not just interested in finding ancient artifacts. They needed to place themselves in a grand past to create a narrative where the Aryans were not just a people, but the direct heirs of the most ancient civilizations. Egypt held a special place in this system, not because of the pyramids and mummies, but because of the symbols and rituals. They called the swastika the solar cross. For them, it was not just a sign, it was a code. The swastika really does appear in the cultures of India, Tibet, and China, and in Egypt, at least in the form of indirect symbolism. The movement of the sun, the four directions, the cult of Ra. They found confirmation of their ideas in this. Sometimes it was far-fetched, sometimes quite convincing. Before the war, some researchers associated with the Unanswered really did visit Egypt unofficially. They were interested in ancient books, burial rituals, ideas about the afterlife, and how the Egyptians connected power, magic, and order. The Nazis saw this as a system, not a religion, but a mechanism of control. It was as if the ancients knew something that had been forgotten, and they came to restore it. I looked at photographs from those expeditions. People in SS uniforms standing by temples, stone bas-reliefs decorated with runes. It wasn't just imitation, it was an attempt to create their own religion, a new one, not relying on symbols that inspire power. When Hitler spoke about bringing back the past, he didn't mean Prussia. He was looking further back into millennia, civilizations that disappeared but left a trace, and he wanted that trace to lead to them. The oldest cake. In the Meyer necropolis, archaeologists found something that's hard to call bread. These are a couple of wheat flatbreads about 10 centimeters in diameter, folded like a book, and according to analysis filled with milk, honey, and sesame. They are about 4,200 years old. According to Guinness World Records, this is the oldest known cake that has survived intact. The secret of its preservation turned out to be in the technology. The dough was baked between two copper molds heated over a fire. When the pastry cooled, a vacuum formed inside, and the product stuck to the metal, remaining airtight. That's how it was found, whole, without mold or decay. It was as if someone had just removed the molds. The cake was found in the tomb of Pepienha the Middle, vizier under Pepi II. The Egyptians placed not only bread and beer in graves, but also food for the journey to Duat, a symbol of rebirth and provisions for the road. It all makes sense here. A recipe with milk and honey, expensive molds, careful arrangement. This isn't cooking for taste. This is a carefully crafted item for funerary rites, made to withstand the passage of time. And it really did survive. Would you like to taste this cake? Write in the comments below the video. We're just starting to unravel these stories. Ancient Roman perfume ingredients. Today we're going on an exciting journey into the past. Imagine you're researchers from the University of Cordoba, and for the first time we managed to discover the composition of Roman perfumes that are more than 2,000 years old. It all started in 2019 in the municipality of Carmona, where archaeological finds were discovered during the restoration of a building. The workers contacted the city administration. And what did they find? A mausoleum that is 2,000 years old with 8 niches, and all of them are in excellent condition. The remains of 6 members of a wealthy family were buried in a common tomb, and there were many different items on them, including a quartz container with solid contents, amphorite. The quartz vessel itself was unusual, because usually such vessels were made of glass, and quartz is a rather hard and durable material. That's why it was an expensive and quite rare item. But the most amazing thing was inside the amphora. It was an ancient perfume, which survived thanks to the good sealing of the vessel. The team from the University of Cordoba, under the guidance of Professor Jose Rafael Ruiz Ari Bola. They conducted an analysis of this perfume, which is already more than 2,000 years old. Their discoveries were published in a scientific journal, Heritage. The researchers used various techniques to determine the composition of the perfume, including X-ray diffraction and gas chromatography. The composition of the perfume had 2 components, a base or binding agent, which helped preserve the fragrance and its essence. In our case, olive oil was used as the base. Interestingly, according to the analysis results, ancient Rome smelled of patchouli. This is an essential oil obtained from a plant of Indian origin, Pogostemon cablin. It is widely used in modern perfumery, but its use in Roman times was unknown. So my friends, this is how scientists decipher the secrets of the past and give us the opportunity to smell the scent of ancient Rome. If you had the chance to get a real piece of jewelry or perfume from the ancient world, not to sell or make money from it, but to wear or keep at home as a souvenir, what would it be? Which ancient empire's jewelry do you like more? Ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, or jewelry from China? Write in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. The Sphinx is older than we think. The Sphinx is one of the most recognizable symbols of Egypt. It is considered the younger brother of the pyramids, carved during the time of Khafre, around 2500 BC, but more and more researchers are convinced that's not the case. The reason is in its body, more precisely in the traces that remain on it. On the surface of the Sphinx, especially on the sides and the back, vertical grooves are visible, deep ones, as if it was eroded by water. Not wind, not sand, but water specifically. The problem is that there hasn't been heavy rainfall in Giza, at least for the last 8,000 years. And according to the calculations of geologist Robert Schoch, such erosion could only have occurred under conditions of prolonged heavy rains, which haven't happened since the end of the last ice age. If Schoch is right, the Sphinx could be thousands of years older than the pyramids. It could be 10,000 years old, or even older. Maybe it stood here before recorded history began, and the pyramids were built next to it later as a sign of respect or fear. It has strange proportions. Some suggest that the head was originally different, larger and not human, that it was altered later, erasing what was there before. Perhaps the face of someone they no longer wanted to remember, or whose name they were afraid to speak. If the Sphinx is truly the remains of a civilization before Egypt, then our entire chronology collapses, because then Egypt is not the beginning, but only a continuation.
Тайна базельской мумии.
I've already talked about this discovery in one of my videos. However, the story changed. In 1975, in the Swiss city of Basel, in the Barfüßer Church, the mummified remains of a woman were found, and to this day it was believed that she died of syphilis. That's the conclusion researchers came to, because a lot of mercury was found in her body. In the 18th century, mercury was used to treat syphilis That's why such conclusions were made, but now it has been established that the woman died from a bacterium unknown to science. The woman's name was Anna Katharina Bischoff. She was the wife of a pastor, and she died in 1787. All of this was established through DNA analysis. Researchers even identified her descendants. One of them, with 99% probability, is the British politician Boris Johnson. Scientists discovered a new bacterium. It was mostly found in the brain tissues, and this correlated with the highest concentration of mercury in the brain. Most likely, the doctor at that time made an incorrect diagnosis and treated her for syphilis with mercury. This significantly weakened the woman's body. In addition, she was overweight, gallstones, and other diseases. In the 18th century, to claim that a wealthy priest's widow had syphilis, which was transmitted sexually, was humiliating. When people of such status died, an obituary was written about them, who the person was in life, what they did, and what they died from. There is not a single word about this woman. The diagnosis of syphilis would not have allowed her to use public baths or receive treatment in a regular hospital. In the end, the mercury they used to treat her slowed down decomposition and turned her into a mummy.
Афера древних египтян.
Archaeologists found an interesting document about a marriage scam in Egypt. The papyrus is over 2,000 years old. Just imagine. We can find out now what kinds of scams men were capable of towards their beloved in ancient Egypt. This manuscript is a complaint from the deceived bride Philomena to King Ptolemy, with a request to punish Numenius, who had promised to marry her. As stated in the text, instead of a wedding, the man simply took his former beloved's dowry for himself. As you can see, the history of marriage scams has very deep roots, even back then. Using legal tricks and committing fraud. Now we know of only one such case, which was documented. But how many of them happened in those years? We can only guess. The document was found in the Deir El Banat necropolis, in the Fayum Oasis. For almost 1,000 years, people were buried here, from the 4th century BC to the times of Byzantine Egypt. The manuscript ended up in the burial as material for ritual decorations. The thing is, not everyone could afford to put precious stones and metals in the grave, so the ancient Egyptians resorted to a trick. They made necklaces from pressed pieces of papyrus, which were then used as offerings to the afterlife. Most often, they used papyrus that was already written on. The next discovery will also be connected to a mass burial, the most lifelike mummy in the world. This story began a little over 100 years ago. It happened in Palermo, Italy. In 1918, Rosalia Lombardo was born, and she passed away just 1 week before her second birthday. The girl died of pneumonia. Obviously, she didn't have time to become popular. Everything happened after her death. The girl's father was devastated. Because of this, he decided to use the services of the best specialist of that time, Alfredo Salafia. The mummification specialist injected a special formalin solution into the girl's arteries. Chlorine, alcohol, salicylic acid, glycerin, and zinc. This protected her circulatory system from decomposition. After this mummification process, the girl was placed in a small glass coffin. To this day, her body is kept in a small church in Palermo. This girl is 100 years old, but she looks like she's alive. And everyone who has seen the mummified girl doesn't believe that she's just sleeping. Mummification helps preserve the body for a long time. However, due to the natural process of decomposition, a healthy and fresh appearance of the deceased is rare. In any case, the appearance will change. It's impossible to perform mummification in a way that completely preserves the skin tone and eye color exactly as they were in life. As they say, the impossible is possible. Either a miracle happened in our case, or the mummification specialist truly had incredible talent. And that's not all. The scientists who constantly observe her, they record weak electrical impulses sent by her brain, lasting 33 and 12 seconds. Such impulses are typical for a living person, even though the girl's death has been confirmed more than once. Whatever this may be, but the mystery of the most lifelike mummy in the world forces tourists from all over the world to come to Sicily and personally observe the little girl with the yellow bow on her head, who looks alive. Did you know that for almost a month now, I've been running a channel on Telegram?
День пишу о находках археологов.
fans in museums, and other interesting historical facts. If you want to learn more about the ancient world, then join the Telegram channel as well. The link to it is in the description below the video. Laser cutting. When you stand next to the Egyptian megaliths, the first thing that strikes you is the scale. But if you look closer, what surprises you even more is not the size, but the precision. Some stone blocks, especially in the temples of Osiris, in Abydos, and in the underground gallery of the Serapeum, are crafted with such precision that even a modern laser would be envious. Right angles, perfectly smooth surfaces, traces of circular drilling with identical spacing, as if they were cut according to a template on a CNC machine. In Saqqara, there are so-called boxes made of pink granite, each weighing more than 70 tons. They're not just perfectly polished. Inside, they have a mirror-like surface and a 90-degree angle. Try to repeat that by hand with copper tools. Even diamond blades today wouldn't achieve such a result without long finishing work. But this was done 4,000 years ago or even earlier. Some blocks in Giza with convex and concave surfaces. At the same time, there's not a drop of mortar between them, but the gap is smaller than the thickness of a blade. How did they work them if copper can't cut granite? What did the Egyptians use to cut? There are hypotheses, vibration-based technologies, sonic cutting, methods of melting. All of them sound like science fiction, but the stone surface itself is not a fantasy. It exists, and it's polished. A burial with headless skeletons. At the archaeological site, in Rabo Velké Lakembe in Slovakia, archaeologists made a gruesome discovery. In one grave, 38 people were buried. However, all of them were headless. The burial dates to around 5000 BC. It seems that this place was the largest early Neolithic settlement in Central Europe. Besides the burial, researchers identified 313 houses. 80 of them were inhabited by people at the same time. They effectively grouped all the buildings into 3 villages. Scientists are certain that about 600 people lived in this settlement. One of the villages was surrounded by a double moat, almost 1.5 kilometers long. It was in this moat that archaeologists found the remains of 38 people, including a child. The buried remains were mixed together, so archaeologists had to spend a lot of time separating 38 individuals from the huge pile of bones. Interestingly, in the Vrabli area, archaeologists had already found decapitated skeletons before, and at that time they concluded that such a burial had a sacred meaning. However, that burial was different from the new one. In the previous case, a separate grave was dug for each person, but in our case, the bodies of 38 people were thrown into one pit and were lying in disarray. A logical question arises. Where are the heads? The first cervical vertebra was found in some of the skeletons. This means it wasn't an execution or a sacrifice. The heads were removed systematically and carefully. If you can say that about a human head. And what about the underwater history of the Netherlands? Urns of the Amazon. When a tree fell deep in the Brazilian Amazon, the rounded edges of pottery appeared under its roots. Archaeologists uncovered 7 burial urns. They were especially large. Inside were human bones, and nearby were the bones of fish and turtles. The urns were only 40 centimeters below the surface, probably under old houses. There were no ceramic lids. It seems they were covered with organic material that has rotted away. The place is Lake Cachila, in the municipality of Fonte Boa. Here, on the high floodplains hundreds of years ago, people built artificial islands. This was not a whim, but engineering. Soil mixed with ceramic fragments was brought in and arranged to create a platform strong enough to support a house. Urns were found on such a platform. The ceramics show an unexpected mix of techniques plus a rare green clay that is known from only a few places in the region. Why fish and turtles were placed in the urns with people remains unknown. It might have been ritualistic, an everyday detail, or symbolized a link to water, but these are only theories for now. But the organization of the site, the artificial islands, and the recurring shapes of the vessels indicate a regular practice, not a one-time event. The urns are now in the Tifi laboratory. There will be dating based on organic material. Perhaps the tradition will even get a name. A creepy harp. A harp over 3,000 years old. It is a unique artifact from ancient Egypt, kept in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum. This exquisite musical instrument. It dates back to 1390 to 1295 BC. This corresponds to the time of the New Kingdom. The harp is made of wood, and it is 82 centimeters long. Its neck is finished with a sculpted image of the head of a Nubian captive. This is not just a decorative element, but a symbolic depiction. It is probably connected with the triumph of the Egyptians in military campaigns. The strings of the harp, visually connecting the head of the captive, may be a metaphor for conquest. The preservation of the object is impressive, considering its age. Similar instruments were used not only for entertainment purposes, but also in ritual ceremonies, which emphasizes their significance in the culture of ancient Egypt. A large void above the Grand Gallery. In 2017, the world was shaken by the news that an unknown chamber was discovered inside the Great Pyramid using muon tomography. It is located right above the Grand Gallery and is comparable to it in size, about 30 meters long. This is not just a crack or a technical gap. This is a real empty space, perfectly integrated into the architecture. And the strangest thing is that it is completely isolated. No entrance, no exit, no access, and no attempts to open it. The scientists from the Scan Pyramids project called this discovery the Great Void. They emphasize that they don't know what's inside. It could be a hidden room, a ritual space, or a secret corridor. But something is holding back further research. It's been more than 7 years and no one has drilled through the wall or sent in a drone. There is a theory that inside there might be something that could change our understanding of when it was built, or even the purpose of the pyramid itself, or about the creators, who might have lived long before Egypt. That's a frightening prospect. Because if the Great Void is a sealed capsule of knowledge, then everything we know about the pharaohs might just be a facade, and the text is still locked inside. The magical protection of the Golden Boy. We tend to think that any find from ancient Egypt immediately goes to scientists who study it, but that's not always the case. Our story began back in 1916, when archaeologists at an ancient cemetery in a place called Nak el Hussein in southern Egypt discovered the mummified Golden Boy. The mummy was taken to the basement of the Egyptian Museum, and all this time, no one touched it. And just recently, they decided to scan the boy. Why this wasn't done earlier is unclear. Maybe they just didn't notice it. Although it's pretty hard not to notice a child's mummy completely covered in gold and jewels. The very fact of such decoration tells us that the boy was not an ordinary mortal. To protect the mummy from damage, scientists used a CT scan. This way, they managed to find out that the boy had magical protection. In the fabrics that wrapped the boy, scientists found 49 amulets of various types. According to historians, these amulets not only helped protect the deceased in the afterlife, but also had properties to resurrect the boy from the dead. These were amulets made in the shape of the Eye of Horus, scarabs, and the Knot of Isis. There was also an Akhet amulet in the form of a rising sun. Many of them are made of gold, while some are made of semi-precious stones, fired clay, or faience. Besides the amulets, there was another feature. The boy was buried in 2 coffins. The outer sarcophagus had Greek inscriptions. The boy was mummified according to the customs of that time. The internal organs were removed and resin was used instead of the brain. He was also found with a golden mask. He was wearing white sandals and adorned with a garland made of fern, which had great ritual significance. According to the Book of the Dead, the white sandals were meant so that the boy could step out of the coffin. From the mysterious golden teenage mummy, let's move on to the strange exhibits in museums. The headless Maya statue. In recent years, all the finds from Mexico have been connected with the construction of the Maya train railway. I've already mentioned several times in previous videos how many interesting things the builders have managed to discover. This time, they found a headless statue the size of a person, 1 meter 65 centimeters tall. Archaeologists believe that the limestone statue is Yamkib, which translates as the god of the phallus or fertility. It depicts a captive who was taken during a military conflict. Prisoners of war with high status were sacrificed, while ordinary soldiers were used as slaves. The sculpture was found in the ancient city of Ashkantok on the Yucatan Peninsula. In the Mayan language, the name of the city means Stone of Three Suns. The settlement existed from 250 to 900 AD. It was first described in the 16th century. Near the city, a huge cave system was previously discovered where, according to archaeologists, local tribes hid from Spanish colonizers. The last mention of this city was in 1500 AD. Most likely, the city ceased to exist around that time. Archaeologists still cannot name the exact reason why the city died out. Ashkantok is a very important and unique place. There are many engravings and inscriptions here that tell us about events of the past. Thanks to the deciphering method of the Soviet scientist I mentioned, we ourselves are able to read about the events and people who were here more than 500 years ago. Visiting an ancient Mayan structure is one of my goals for the coming years, and when I do it, I will definitely tell you about it and show you. This was not created by humans. In 1995, divers first noticed strange circles with labyrinths and ridges, decorated with shells, on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. At first, this was attributed to currents and mythical underwater architects. The real explanation for the discovery only appeared in 2011, when an underwater photographer captured the architect himself. The white-spotted pufferfish, Torqueginer albimaculosus. The pattern turned out to be simple and quite interesting. The male spends several days plowing the sand with his pectoral and tail fins. The diameter of the construction is up to 2 meters. Large ridges along the edges catch the current, and in the center, the fish sifts the sand and lays down the finest grains. On top, there are neat decorations made of shells and pebbles. All this is not just for beauty. The fine sand holds the eggs, the edges dampen the currents, and the shells help direct the water flow. Females select mates by the quality of the construction. Cleaner centers and smoother ridges increase spawning chances. After spawning, the circle briefly serves as an incubator. When the larvae emerge, the structure gradually collapses. After a year, the cycle repeats. In the same place or nearby, it turns out that architecture and design here are not metaphors, but practical solutions. The shape is directly linked to the survival of the offspring. Where traces of an ancient civilization are easy to spot, it's often worth taking a closer look at the behavior of living creatures. The pufferfish doesn't build a city, but it solves an engineering problem. And it does it just as well as any textbook. Choosing the right material, considering the current, protecting the center, and attracting a mate, this is what intelligence sometimes looks like in nature. No legends, just real results. Venus of Willendorf. In 1908, archaeologists in Austria made a unique discovery. They found the Venus of Willendorf. This tiny figurine, only 11 centimeters tall, depicts a woman with voluptuous forms, and it is about 25,000 years old. It was found in the village of Willendorf and quickly became one of the most famous symbols of Paleolithic art. The Venus of Willendorf is carved from limestone and painted with red ochre. Her voluptuous forms, emphasize breasts, belly, and hips, symbolize fertility and feminine beauty. The figurine's face is absent, which may indicate that its creators wanted to focus more on the body and its symbolic meaning. This figurine remains the subject of much research and debate. Some scholars believe that the Venus of Willendorf may have been used in rituals related to fertility. Others believe that it could have been a talisman or amulet. Of course, there have also been attempts to link this figurine to extraterrestrial origins. Some researchers associate its unusual shape and remarkable detail for that time with a possible resemblance to visitors from deep space. But why only one such figurine has been found so far remains unclear to archaeologists. The tomb that remains unopened. Everyone knows about the Sphinx, but almost no one knows that there is likely a cavity beneath it, sealed and even partially filled with concrete. Back in the 1990s, geophysicist Tomasz Dobecki conducted acoustic probing of the plateau. Under the front paws of the Sphinx, an anomaly was discovered, a hollow chamber with clear rectangular edges. It could not have been a natural formation. It was a room or a tomb or something else. This news rocked the world of alternative archaeology. The claims went even further. Allegedly, ancient Egyptian texts mentioned a certain hall of records, a place where knowledge left by the gods before the flood was kept. And it could have been right there, under the Sphinx. One step, and we could have opened the door to a prehistoric past. But instead, there was silence. The Egyptian authorities gave permission for excavations. The site was declared closed for research. Moreover, according to unconfirmed reports, the shaft at the lower part of the Sphinx was filled with concrete. Just like that, without any comments. The reason is unclear. Perhaps not because there's nothing there, but because they know exactly what is there. The mystery of the blue lotus. There are legends about this beautiful flower. It grows only in the rivers and lakes of Africa and Asia. The blue lotus, also known as the Egyptian lotus or sacred lotus, has beautiful blue petals and possesses healing properties. This flower was very popular in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians believed that the water lily helped in the journey to the afterlife and in communicating with the gods. It is also mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and was considered a symbol of immortality. One of the reasons why the flower was so popular in ancient times is its ability to influence a person's consciousness and behavior. It also expands the boundaries of perception. In short, it is a powerful hallucinogen. Any ancient Egyptian priest was familiar with the magical properties of the blue lotus. One of the most well-known natural hallucinogens is ayahuasca, which is still used by indigenous peoples of the Amazon and Brazilian shamans when they perform religious rituals. Another huge advantage of the blue lotus is that it doesn't require special care or conditions. In ancient Egypt, medicine, magic, and religion were very closely connected to each other. To be honest, even though people nowadays have become more educated and are not as wild, many still believe that illnesses can be cured with some kind of magical rituals and completely refuse to go to hospitals. Archaeologists first noted mention of this flower in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and later they discovered the Ebers Papyrus, where they found almost 1,000 different recipes and treatment methods using the blue lotus. It is a powerful aphrodisiac. It was often used by the elite at secret gatherings in temples, adding it to sacred wines. Its fragrance is so wonderful that on the walls of tombs you can see images of people inhaling it. The blue lotus can be found in erotic papyri. A portrait of a Viking. In the collection of the National Museum of Denmark, a miniature figurine made of walrus ivory, found back in 1796 in a burial mound in Norway, has been re-examined. The height is about 3 centimeters, and it dates back to the second half of the 10th century. An unpleasant king from the game Hnefatafl, the predecessor of chess, but the key is in the details. A straight part, neat sideburns, a mustache lifted above the lip, a beard trimmed into a goatee and gathered into a single braid. Such detailed work is rare in Viking archaeology. Here you can see exactly how they wore their hair and beard. Curator Peter Pins calls the item as close to a portrait as we can possibly get. The hair and beard are shown from all sides, not schematically, but with fine styling details. Similar figures usually preserve this emphasis on the beard, a sign of masculine strength and status, well understood from the sagas. The hands of this specimen are damaged, but the composition is clear, meaning we are not looking at an abstract warrior, but a specific image of a ruler, recognizable by his hairstyle and beard. The material also says a lot. Walrus ivory is a northern resource that traveled along trade routes to workshops. The carving and lacquering technique shows skilled workmanship, and the choice of subject reflects the value of power and appearance in public representation. Deserted tunnels leading nowhere. There is a place in Egypt where tourists are not allowed, not because it's dangerous, but because there are too many questions there. One of these areas is located just south of the Giza complex. Beneath a layer of sand lies a network of tunnels, either buried and forgotten or intentionally filled in. For decades, local residents have spoken about empty halls beneath the sand, where you can hear echoes, feel drafts, and even notice smells, as if there is air underground. But officially, there is nothing there, and anything that was accidentally discovered was quickly buried again. In the 2010s, a group of researchers received a rare permit for ground-penetrating radar scanning and discovered long, straight structures beneath the surface, possibly corridors, some with turns tens of meters long, about 5 meters deep. All of them ran strictly parallel to the main axis of the plateau. But as soon as the data reached the press, the permit for further work was revoked. The cameras were removed and the sand was put back in place. There are photos showing that part of the excavation started in crevices among the ancient ruins, stone descents, steps that seem to lead downward. All of this has been crudely sealed with cement and bricks. On one of these walls, someone scratched the word silenced in English with a nail. No one knows who wrote it. But too much points to the fact that Egypt is not what lies on the surface, but what is beneath it. And it's very important to someone that we don't go down there. The gilded statue of Hercules. Now that's a story any archaeologist would tell with excitement. Imagine you're digging a hole in the heart of Rome, and then bam, a huge bronze finger is sticking right out of the ground. This happened in 1864 at Campo de Fiori Square, when workers were reinforcing the foundation of the old Palazzo Piorighetti. When they came across a huge wall and columns, they kept digging deeper, and then, in the ground, a bronze finger. It was so big you could think it belonged to a monster. But who would have expected a whole statue was buried underground? Of course, the archaeologists continued the excavation, and soon they found the rest of the statue, an enormous bronze Hercules and the bronze lion that Hercules had defeated. But the statue was damaged. It was missing its feet and had a hole in the back of its head. Why was it there? After all, there were many superstitions in Rome, and one of them said, if lightning struck something, it had to be buried quickly because the gods didn't like it. Apparently, lightning struck the statue and drilled a hole in the back of its head. That's why the people of Rome decided to bury it. And the walls and columns that the workers discovered turned out to be an ancient theater built by Pompey. He cleverly bypassed the ban on building a theater in Rome by first constructing a temple and then attaching a theater to it. By the way, there's a restaurant there now where you can feel like a Roman. In the end, the statue of Hercules was restored and placed in the Vatican. So if you ever go there, be sure to find a spot to see it. The sunken port of Cleopatra. Off the coast near Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria, archaeologists found a submerged area with signs of an ancient harbor. Kathleen Martinez's team, together with marine archaeologist Bob Ballard, describes rows of massive foundations, estimated to be over 6 meters high. Cemented blocks, fragments of columns, storage and transport amphorae, and most importantly, numerous anchors dating back to the era of Cleopatra VII. Such a set of items usually accompanies a working port, docking lines, storage areas, and navigational equipment. In 2022, an underground tunnel was discovered here, stretching 1,227 meters toward the Mediterranean Sea. Inside it, there were ceramics and objects from the Ptolemaic period. The harbor could have served the city complex and the temple of Taposiris Magna, and during the reign of Cleopatra, her fleet as well. This is indicated by the dating and the maritime profile of the finds. But test pits, sediment dating, and linking the structures to the ancient shoreline are needed. If confirmed, we will have rare evidence of what the coastal network near the Ptolemaic capital looked like and how it functioned. Not in text, but in stone, wood, and iron. A gold ring with the inscription, Lady of the Land. The inscription, Lady of the Land, along with the image of the god of joy, Bes, were found on gold rings. Such a discovery was made by archaeologists from the Australian University in an ancient Egyptian burial site in the city of Akhetaton, approximately 3,300 years old. Engraved on one of the rings, Bes was the god of joy and the protector of women in childbirth. He is depicted on the ring as a dwarf. In addition to the rings, a necklace made of golden petals was found. One of the rings had the inscription, Mistress of the Earth. Archaeologists are not yet rushing to suggest a possible name for the owner of this ring. In the coming months, they plan to gather all the findings together and study them in detail. Akhetaton was built by Pharaoh Akhenaten, who tried to change the polytheistic religion of Egypt. He intended to make Aten, the god of the solar disk, the main god. He moved the capital of Egypt from Thebes to Akhetaton. But soon after Akhenaten's death, the new city was abandoned, and the religious reforms were reversed by his son Tutankhamun. All artifacts found in Akhenaten, now Amarna, are highly valued among archaeologists. In the previous video, I talked about how the authorities in Egypt try to hide the history of the ancient world and sell artifacts to wealthy collectors. A cache in a lost city of myth. It's nice when an ancient city from myths turns out to be real and actually hides treasures. Archaeologists found one of these cities in Greece, and it's called Tenea. Historians only had information about this city based on myths. But if you believe the ancient Greek myths, then the Minotaur should be somewhere too. That's why scientists were skeptical about the ancient Greek texts. During the excavation of the city of Tyne, researchers found several ancient caches with coins. And that's no myth anymore, because the coins are real. Local residents made an accidental discovery in 1984 when they were digging a well and stumbled upon an ancient sarcophagus. By the time specialists in official history arrived here, looters had already known about this place for a long time, and part of the ancient city had already been looted. Maybe the looters weren't persistent, or what they stole was enough for them. The archaeologists still had enough material to continue studying the city. They discovered a large public building from the Roman period with complex stonework. While studying this building, the archaeologists found a cache with 18 silver and copper coins. Nearby, in another cache, there were 2,100 different coins. Their approximate age is the 5th to 6th century AD near the city necropolis. The research team excavated a Roman burial with an underground funerary chamber. Inside it, archaeologists discovered a 1st century BC coin minted in Corinth, a bronze coin from Athens of the classical period, a lamp depicting the god Ares, a glass incense burner, an urn, a bowl, and a lamp. And in the tomb itself, a child was buried. The last mention of the city of Tyne was in an ancient text by the 2nd century AD geographer Pausanias. He believed that the city was built by Trojan prisoners of war around 1100 BC, if there is any real history in the myths of ancient Greece. So what about the sagas of the ancient Vikings? Stay tuned. A person can't fit through there. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are strange passages that for decades were thought to be ventilation shafts. But the problem is that neither air nor a person could get through there. These shafts start in the so-called Queen's Chamber and extend upward at a sharp angle, ending in stone plugs with copper fittings. At first, they weren't even taken seriously, but then a robot was sent in there. In 1993, engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink designed a mechanism that was able to crawl inside. It crawled along the smooth walls as if the shaft had been specially polished. At the end of its path, the robot came across a stone slab with 2 pins resembling door handles. It seemed like something was hidden behind it, but it was urgently recalled. The archaeologists remained silent. The Egyptian authorities did not grant permission for a second attempt, and Gantenbrink was simply removed from the project. The second robot, launched later, drilled a tiny hole, and behind it was another chamber. It's unclear whether it was empty or if no one wants to reveal what was found inside. These shafts couldn't have been used during life. They're too narrow. But they're perfect for storing something that was meant to remain untouched.
Легендарный золотой конь.
That's why recently, news spread again on social media that near Anapa, Russia, they supposedly found the legendary golden horse of King Mithridates Eupator. It's noteworthy that similar reports already appeared in 2021 and turned out to be an April Fool's joke. Now, however, the excavations taking place near the village of Anapskaya have once again made people talk about this story. At the site of a planned preschool, archaeologists discovered a burial ground about 2,000 years old. In one of the graves, they found not only human remains, but also those of a horse. In others, there were horse skeletons, glass and ceramic dishes, various beads, as well as weapons and harnesses. The items, including beads made of amber, carnelian, and faience, indicate connections between the local tribes and the ancient world. Among the finds, a scarab was noted, a symbol of rebirth among the ancient Egyptians. Particular interest was aroused by glass vessels, which became widespread throughout the periphery of the Roman Empire, thanks to advancements in glass-blowing techniques. Despite the excitement, there is no direct evidence that this is actually Mithridates' golden horse. Scientists emphasize that legends can easily grow, and the rich burial of a noble person can quite possibly acquire fantastic features over time. The mysteries of the Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible, is an ancient manuscript full of mysteries. Created in the 13th century, it impresses with its size and content. Inside the book, you can find not only the texts of the Old and New Testaments, but also an image of the devil himself, which takes up an entire page. However, the most intriguing are the astronomical maps, which appear unusually detailed for their time. This has given rise to many theories about the possible extraterrestrial origin of the knowledge used in creating the codex. Some researchers believe that the manuscript may contain encrypted messages or knowledge passed down by extraterrestrial civilizations. Legend has it that the Codex Gigas was written by a monk in a single night with the help of the devil. What secrets does this mysterious manuscript hold? And is it possible that its pages contain encrypted keys to ancient knowledge that came from space? The Codex Gigas remains one of the most mysterious artifacts of antiquity, which we will definitely study someday. Metals that shouldn't exist. When we talk about ancient Egypt, we think of bronze, copper, and gold. But some discoveries cast doubt on this. In tombs that were long considered to be fully explored, objects are sometimes found made of alloys whose chemical composition does not match any alloy known from that era. One such case happened back in the 1990s. In a cache near the Pyramid of Unas, a small plate was found, presumably a decorative element of a sarcophagus. Its composition included zinc, nickel, and a tiny fraction of aluminum. The problem is that aluminum began to be mass-produced only in the 19th century. It does not occur in its pure form in nature, and its production requires high temperatures and electrolysis. So where did it come from in ancient Egypt? Another example is a cylindrical object resembling a tooltip, found in the Saqqara area. Analysis showed the presence of rare earth metals, which are difficult to extract even today. The object had signs of wear, as if it had been used for drilling or cutting stone, not wood. There were others as well: rings, plate fragments, internal parts of sarcophagi. In all cases, the composition is complex, and the technology used to produce the alloy goes beyond ancient Egyptian metallurgy. But official reports about these findings were either not published or limited themselves to the phrase, "The composition does not correspond to the era." A double burial from the Viking Age. Archaeologists made a unique discovery in 1981 near the village of Gedrum, not far from the city of Roskilde in Denmark. The researchers found not just an unusual, but a very strange burial by the standards of that time. In the grave lay a woman and a man, but they were buried in completely different ways. The reconstructed burial is now considered the main attraction of the local museum in Roskilde. In the photo, you can see huge stones lying on the woman's chest, left arm, and legs, and next to her lies a heavy spearhead, 40 centimeters long. It's not always possible to determine sex from bones with 100% certainty, but in our case, archaeologists are confident the pelvis of the skeleton is small. However, experts are sure that the woman had given birth more than once. The skeleton also shows that the woman was not young. The spear is too large to be actually used in battle, so it was more symbolic. But the story with the stones is more interesting. There is an opinion that the huge stones were placed on the woman out of fear of her. People thought that this way it would protect them from the woman being able to rise after death. There were also questions about the man. You can see that his neck was broken and his legs were tied. That means he was hanged. This looks more like a criminal. But who would need to put a criminal and a female warrior in the same grave? There was a suggestion that he was the woman's servant. That was before they did a DNA testing on the remains. It turned out to be even more complicated. The woman and the man were related, mother and son. It turns out we found the real reason for the fear of this woman. Stones were piled over her so she couldn't rise from the grave and take revenge for her son's death. And the heavy spearhead was most likely the witch's staff. You might think this is complete nonsense, but there's an explanation for this too, and a coincidence in an ancient saga written in the 13th century. The saga tells the story of the sorceress Katla and her son Odd. Odd was a criminal, however, no one could injure or kill him, not with a knife nor with an axe, because he was protected by his mother's witchcraft. She would hide her son at home and turn him into a dog or a pig. But another sorceress appeared who was able to expose them. In the end, the son was hanged right in front of his mother, and the mother was stoned to death. But she managed to curse her killers. It's a very interesting coincidence. Could it be that archaeologists have actually found real evidence of the ancient saga? If myths and sagas can be real stories, then what about the golden boy from Egypt? The horror of Osiris's afterlife kingdom. Today we will embark on a fascinating journey to ancient Egypt, where we will unravel the mysteries of the mysterious Book of the Dead. Some might think, the Book of the Dead? Is it some kind of detective story or horror movie? But in reality, it's a collection of texts that help the deceased deal with the difficulties of the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that after death, we face a journey to the underworld, which they called Duat. It was a kind of land of the dead, consisting of 14 zones. Imagine a long and difficult road that you have to travel to reach eternity. But even after death, we need rules, right? This is where the Book of the Dead comes in. It's like an instruction manual for the deceased, written on sacred papyri, sarcophagi, and even on the burial wrappings of mummies. These texts contain special spells and magical formulas that help overcome all the difficulties along the way. If the deceased person lived a good, honest life, his soul would pass through all the zones of the Duat without any problems and reach eternity. And now, here's the most interesting part. Upon arrival at the Hall of Two Truths, the soul faces judgment. And not just any judgment, but a divine one, led by Osiris himself. The judgment takes place in the form of weighing the heart on scales against a feather, the symbol of truth. But what if the heart turns out to be heavier than the feather? Then the soul would meet the terrifying monster, Ammit, made up of parts of 3 dangerous animals, a crocodile, a lion, and a hippopotamus. This death-devouring beast would take hearts weighed down by sins, and that would be the end of the soul. So friends, the Book of the Dead is not just a collection of texts. It's a real guidebook to the world beyond life, a map of the road to eternity. Remember, even in the afterlife, it's worth being honest and kind. The singing sarcophagi of the Serapeum. Beneath the sands of Saqqara lies a 300-meter-long gallery, the Serapeum. In its side niches stand 40 granite boxes, each weighing over 60 tons. Egyptologists call them the sarcophagi of the sacred Apis bulls. But inside they are almost empty, with only rare bone fragments. But the main thing here is the acoustics. When acousticians from Massachusetts first turned on a low-frequency generator inside one of the boxes, in 2019 the granite began to sing. A perfectly pure tone of 110 hertz, which matches the resonant frequency of the human chest. If you stand inside, the sound literally vibrates in your bones. Ancient priests could have used this to put themselves and possibly bulls into an altered state. But then why are there half-meter thick lids polished on the inside to a mirror finish? There's a hypothesis. The boxes were not tombs, but resonators that amplified the vibrations of the earth. Their polished inner surface reflected sound multiple times, creating standing waves. Some researchers suggest that there could have been an entire sound organ in the complex, a system of chambers tuned to different frequencies. If that's the case, the Serapeum is not a cemetery, it's an ancient laboratory of acoustic energy.
Нестандартный металл Египта.
A new study has shown something simple. In the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 to 1650 BC, Egyptian craftsmen deliberately made bronze with arsenic. Traces of a special additive were found in the slags and melts. Spice is rich in arsenic. This is not an accidental impurity from the ore, but a deliberate ingredient that was added so the alloy would be harder, the edge would last longer, and wear during use would be lower. The analyses were carried out by a team from the Czech Academy of Sciences together with colleagues in Cairo and France. The results showed that the composition of the bronze was controlled and replicated. This means that the workshops had stable supplies of raw materials and a clear technological process, not just random attempts to make strong bronze. There is also a side conclusion for scientists. Lead entering the smelting process with spice can mix isotopic indicators, causing many studies to overinterpret the copper's origin.
Оценивают.
Artifacts in the grave. When I first saw this find, I had the feeling that someone had deliberately planted artifacts there. It looked that implausible. A burial from the Second World War in Poland, in the Tukola forest. Everything is standard. Remains of German uniforms, equipment, a tag. But next to the body there are Mesolithic stone tools, Neolithic pottery, and Roman coins. It's real, verified, not a fake. I spent a long time trying to understand the official explanation. There's only one version. They say it's just a coincidence. It just so happened that ancient tribes used to live in this place, and the soldier died right there. Yeah, sure, just a coincidence. Just like the fact that this place had been an area of interest for Nazi archaeological intelligence since the beginning of the war. They were obsessed with ancient civilizations. It wasn't just an interest. It was a real mania. The NNR would send expeditions to Tibet, Iran, and Africa, but even in Europe they were actively searching for evidence to support their theory that the Aryans were not just a people, but the heirs of an ancient world empire. And here, in this grave, there's an SS man and objects that are 2,000 years old. I can't shake the thought, what if this isn't a coincidence? What if he was part of some program, testing, moving artifacts, or even guarding them? The Nazis attached ritual significance to objects from the past. They believed that ancient artifacts were keys, not to history, but to power. Maybe this soldier didn't die by accident. Maybe he died because of what he was guarding. Armor made of 6,000 scales. Archaeologists in China's Kongxi province made an amazing discovery. In the tomb of Liu He, the ruler of Haihun from the Western Han Dynasty, a scale composite armor was discovered, which is more than 2,000 years old. This find not only demonstrates the advanced level of craftsmanship during the Han era, but also fundamentally differs from the typical single material armors of that time. According to the report of the Provincial Institute of Archaeology and Cultural Relics, the plates were made of lacquered iron, copper, and leather, with many of them being only 1 centimeter wide and 0.2 centimeters thick. The restoration took about 2 years. Specialists assembled around 6,000 pieces that were found stacked in the armory section of the tomb, next to swords and knives. According to Yan Jun, the leader of the excavation team, their arrangement and size demonstrate an incredible delicacy of craftsmanship that was previously unknown for Han Dynasty armor. Cosmic alignment. We can forgive the ancients for inaccuracies. We can explain mistakes, but Egypt did not make mistakes. The Great Pyramid is aligned with the cardinal points with a deviation of less than 0.05 degrees. This is more precise than most modern buildings. To achieve such alignment, it's not enough to just know where north is. You need to take into account the Earth's precession, its axial wobble, which shifts the starry sky over millennia. That means, to build the pyramid so precisely, the builders would have had to observe the stars for centuries, or have data that simply couldn't have existed. Even stranger, the 3 main pyramids of Giza align with the pattern of Orion's belt's 3 stars. Not approximately, but with precise alignment to the era of 10,500 BC. According to astronomical models, that's exactly when the constellation Orion occupied the same position above the horizon. The Egyptians called Orion Sa, the body of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Coincidence? There's another mystery connected to this alignment, the center pyramid. The distance from it to the center of the Earth between the north and south poles and the eastern and western meridians is minimal. This is the geographic axis of the planet. How did they determine it? Science relies on observation, trial and error, and millennia of experience. The alternative is someone already knew, and the pyramid is just a trace from their instruments, or a marker for those meant to return. Monolith on Phobos. Phobos, one of the 2 moons of Mars, hides an amazing secret, a giant monolith. This monolith, about 85 meters tall, was first discovered in images taken by spacecraft. Its size and regular shape raise many questions among scientists. Some researchers suggest that the monolith could be an artificial structure left by an ancient extraterrestrial civilization. This hypothesis is based on its unusual geometry and isolation from other geological formations on the surface of Phobos. The monolith looks as if it was deliberately placed at this location. This discovery has sparked intense discussions in the scientific community and has given rise to many theories. Some believe that the monolith could be an ancient beacon or marker left for future space explorers. Others see it as possible evidence of extraterrestrial activity in our solar system. The giant sword in Japan. Japan is famous for its history, especially the history of ancient swords that were unusually large in size. In the Tomio Maruyama burial mound, archaeologists found an iron dako sword. The dako blade got its name because of its wavy, snake-like shape. Japanese archaeologists often found such swords in burial sites, and there have already been more than 80 such discoveries. But this sword is unique because it is the longest of all that have been preserved in their entirety. It was impossible to use such swords in battle, especially considering the average height of the Japanese. Most likely the sword was really used only for various ceremonies. The mirror and shields were used as tools to protect the dead from evil spirits, and the giant sword could enhance such protection. Besides the sword, a bronze mirror in the shape of a shield was found in the burial, although such mirrors were usually round. Its dimensions were 64 by 31 centimeters, and it weighed almost 6 koi. Archaeologists have not yet noticed any signs of looting, so they hope they will be able to determine who is in the closed coffin and to whom the burial items belonged. The approximate age of the burial is between 300 and 710 AD. The skulls are not of that type. When archaeologists began systematically opening tombs in southern Egypt and Nubia in the early 20th century, they noticed something strange. Some of the skulls they found did not match human anatomy. Yes, they had eye sockets, a jaw, a parietal part, but they all showed abnormalities. Elongated occiputs, disproportionately large cranial vaults, and the absence of sutures that a normal skull should have. Some skulls were so elongated that they resembled cones, as if they had been artificially deformed, but no traces of artificial deformation were found. Later, during the 1950s and 60s, British and French anatomists began discussing these findings at closed conferences, but there were almost no official publications. Why? Perhaps because these skulls were found not only in Egypt. A similar shape was discovered in Peru, Mexico, even in the Caucasus. Their age ranges from 2,000 to 5,000 years. Different continents, different cultures, the same result. Some believe that elongated skulls are the result of special head binding during infancy. For example, the Maya did this. But in a number of Egyptian finds, the bone structure suggests the opposite. The shape was originally like that. If it's not a disease, then it's a species, not ours. Or ours, but forgotten. Some images in temples even reinforce this impression. They show beings with elongated heads, in special headdresses, perhaps not to decorate, but to hide, or on the contrary, to highlight. Because if these skulls are not fake, not a coincidence, and not a deformity, then who did the Egyptians live with? Glass brain. Archaeologists made a unique and one-of-a-kind discovery during their excavations in Italy. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD was a disaster for a huge number of people. The Roman cities of Pompeii, Herculaneum, and Stabiae were completely covered by the lava and ash from the volcano. Archaeologists are still conducting excavations here, trying to find something interesting. This time, they got lucky. They found a real human brain turned to glass. The thermal energy released during the eruption was 500 times greater than the energy released by the atomic bomb explosion over Hiroshima. The remains of a 25-year-old man from Herculaneum, who died during the eruption of Vesuvius, were discovered in the 1960s. His body was found in a small room in the College of Augustus, a building dedicated to Emperor Octavian Augustus. The young man's body was on a bed, and judging by his posture, he was asleep at the moment of death. To conduct their research and study ancient artifacts, archaeologists have to piece everything together bit by bit. The archaeologists quickly decided to open the young man's skull and discovered his brain had turned to glass, but no similar vitrification appeared elsewhere in his body. Analysis showed that the material in the skull was indeed human brain. Characteristic fatty acids were found in the glass fragments. They couldn't have entered the skull externally, since no traces were found nearby. By examining the charred remains of wood, scientists determined that the temperature in this area reached up to 520 degrees. The fat in the man's body literally ignited, and the soft tissues evaporated. After that, the temperature around dropped sharply, which led to the vitrification of the brain remains. The man's lungs turned into a spongy mass, which was also not observed in other remains. Scientists have already seen a similar situation with the lungs in victims of more modern tragic events, such as the fires in Dresden and Hamburg during World War II. Let's move from the glass brain to glass tools. The mysterious Idbaraki. People remember the Idbaraki, a people with human bodies and dog heads. In Oguz Khan's tales, they are placed on the northwestern outskirts near Siberia. The name is formed from Id, meaning dog, and Barak, a long-haired breed. The description is consistent: dark skin, mottled fur, and a dog's skull. Oguz Khan once retreated before them, went into exile, and later returned and defeated them. The conquered lands he gave to his son Kipchak, the ancestor of the Kipchaks. Kipchak's name is tied to the legend of being born inside a hollow tree. To explain why dog-headed people appear in these stories, we must recall the early Turks' relationship with dogs. The dog is a helper and a guide, not an evil spirit. In the 12-year cycle, there is a year of the dog. In shamanic rituals, its behavior was imitated. In myths, the dog Barak carries the shaman upwards, and in Altai stories, the dog protects the first people from Erlik. So one's own dog is a protector and a connection to the spirits. Against this background, the Idbaraki represent outsiders, the same dog-like traits, but now not a protector, but a boundary and a threat. This approach is understandable. It marks the edge of our world and reminds us of the rules of behavior on foreign land. Parallels can be found among our neighbors as well: Greek cynocephaly, Indian dog guardians, European chronicles about northern tribes. The pattern is always the same everywhere. An unusual face is a sign of distance. One can argue whether there was a real impression behind it: masks, totemic headdresses, or distant neighbors with unfamiliar appearances. But for tradition, this is not necessary. In legends, those on the other side were called Idbaraki. This was how they marked the boundary of their world. About the Amber One. I've heard about the Amber Room since childhood, the most mysterious loss of World War II, taken away, hidden, dissolved somewhere between the fronts. There are around 50 versions. There are almost no traces left. But last year, news appeared that made everyone reconsider everything. Polish historians announced that they had found a new lead: archives, testimonies, old routes of moving valuables. And everything points to one thing: the Amber Room could have been transported deep into Polish territory, possibly into one of the castles, into a tunnel, into a mine. It's not exactly established, but the fact is that the trail, which was long considered dead, resurfaced again. What caught my attention wasn't even that, but the reaction. It was as if someone really didn't want this topic to be brought up again. There were attempts to hush it up, to dispute it, to push it aside, and the more I think about it, the more clearly I understand. The Amber Room is not just a lost artifact, it's a marker. It's a signal that much more disappeared in that war than we're used to thinking, and some things still haven't been found. A pyramid that wasn't built. If the Pyramid of Khufu had been built during Khufu's own time, we would have inscriptions or images about it, or at least mentions in sources. But nothing like that exists. Not a single hieroglyph inside the pyramid says who created it. There are no scenes of construction, no frescoes, no instructions, no thanks to the gods. Only empty walls and strange precision. When researchers began to compare the dates, they discovered something else. The masonry technology in the Pyramid of Khufu is more precise than in the later pyramids built 100 years later. The stone blocks there are not just even, they are fitted with an accuracy of less than a millimeter. Some, weighing up to 60 tons, are placed at heights of dozens of meters, without glue, without any traces of tools, but with architectural solutions that we can't even replicate today. Neither a crane, nor an elevator, nor 10,000 slaves can explain this. And that's where a theory emerges. What if the pyramid was already standing and the pharaoh simply found it and claimed it as his own? Maybe he added something to it. But the foundation, the voids, the perfect alignment with the cardinal directions, these are not from his time. They are from something more ancient, more precise, maybe even not human. Some scientists call this a structural anachronism, but essentially this pyramid doesn't fit into the era, the logic, or the history. Myths. If the Nazis were truly inventive in anything, it was in how they rewrote myths. Almost any ancient culture where echoes of power, ritual, or sacrifice could be found was turned into yet another Aryan source. And it didn't matter how historically accurate it was. The main thing was that it sounded impressive. With the Vikings, it was simple. They were taken as an example of pure masculinity. Runes, swords, images of grim heroism. It was because of this logic that Himmler tried to turn the SS not into an army, but into a cult, with its own symbols, rituals, even places of power. That same Wewelsburg castle was supposed to become something like a new Valhalla, a temple for a future caste of warrior priests. With the Aztecs, things were more complicated. The geography was too distant, but the Nazis were interested in the practice of sacrifices. They were attracted by the very idea, ritual death as an act of power and submission. In the DNR records, there are mentions of parallels between Germanic myths and mythologies from across the Americas. Perhaps they weren't looking for connections, but for justification. They needed to prove that human life is a resource, that sacrifice can be sacred and controlled. And then there's Atlantis. There were no boundaries here at all. There were many theories, but they adopted one of them. Supposedly, the Atlanteans are actually the Proto-Aryans, a tall white race with advanced technology and knowledge, destroyed by a catastrophe. And the Reich's mission was to reclaim what was lost, to reinterpret the fall, to build a new order from old ruins. The Nazis didn't just believe in these stories, they turned them into a structure, an architecture, a meaning that they used to justify their power. That's why this is still frightening. Myths weren't fairy tales for them, they were blueprints. The medieval chair from Trossingen is a rare and valuable example of early medieval furniture. This wooden chair was found in the burial chamber of a man in Trossingen, Germany, and dates back to around 580 AD. Made from maple and ash, it demonstrates a high degree of craftsmanship by ancient artisans. The chair is remarkably well preserved because the burial was located in a marshy area, which created favorable conditions for preventing the decomposition of organic materials. Although the wood has darkened over time, it has retained its structure, allowing archaeologists to study its construction and manufacturing style. The find is part of the collection at the Baden-Württemberg Archaeological Museum in Konstanz, Germany. Lost cities in the Sahara. In old satellite images of the Sahara, in areas where there seems to be nothing, strange shapes began to appear. Straight lines, squares, sometimes semicircles, as if the bases of domes. At first, scientists attributed this to geology, but when the shapes started repeating, it became clear this was not nature. There are especially many of these phantom structures in the southwest of Egypt, in the Gilf Kabir area, where there is only sand today. Entire settlements might have once stood. They were not Bedouin settlements, but stone ones, well laid out, with remnants of walls where you can even make out the street layout. Now these sites are buried and no one is excavating them. The local tribes insist it's better not to go there. They say those are forgotten places left by those who came before the sun. Stone pipes of Beigu. In a remote region of China, at the foot of Mount Beigu, amazing underground pipes made of stone have been discovered. These ancient structures, which are over 5,000 years old, are astonishing in their complexity and precision. Excavations have shown that the pipes go deep underground and come in various sizes, from small diameters of a few centimeters to huge ones, over a meter in diameter. The technology used to create these pipes remains a mystery to modern scientists. How were ancient civilizations able to carve and install such complex structures? Their origin and purpose remain unknown, which leads to many hypotheses and assumptions. Researchers suggest that these pipes might have been part of an ancient water supply or ventilation system. However, there is also a more intriguing theory. Perhaps the Beigu stone pipes are evidence of extraterrestrial involvement. The precision and scale of the construction make us wonder about the existence of ancient technologies that we do not yet understand. Interestingly, similar artifacts are known from other places around the world. For example, on the Colorado Plateau, The pipes here also range in diameter from 50 centimeters to 1 centimeter. Archaeologists have found that these pipes are coated with an iron-containing crust on the inside. Something similar has also been found in Louisiana, USA. In this case, the diameter reaches 70 centimeters. The last teeth of the Führer. When I read about the Argentine bases and Hitler's escape, I always had one question. Is there even a single direct piece of evidence that he actually died in 1945? In April 2024, the FSB published a photo that answered this question. The picture shows a jaw remains officially recognized as Hitler's remains. They are kept in a cigarette box. 9 teeth, all genuine. French forensic expert Philippe Charlier compared this jaw with X-rays from 1944. The match is absolute. Moreover, traces of cyanide were found on the metal of the dentures. This confirms the suicide theory. Poison, capsule, gunshot, just like in the official sources. It's a strange feeling. For years, we chased conspiracies and legends about an escape, but it was much simpler. No tunnels, doubles, or submarines. Just a jaw, a dusty archive, decades without publicity. As if no one wanted this subject to be put to rest once and for all. Maybe because reality isn't as spectacular as the myth.
Египетские артефакты в Антарктиде.
This story sounds like science fiction, but some sources, including reports from military expeditions, point to strange discoveries in the area of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. Among them are fragments of columns supposedly covered with hieroglyphs and remains of stone structures resembling Egyptian capitals. Officially, none of this has been recognized, and all the objects have either disappeared or have been declared natural formations. But the question remains, where did they come from? One theory suggests that in ancient times, Antarctica was not covered with ice. The Piri Reis map, drawn in the 16th century, shows the outlines of the continent's coastline beneath the ice, with an accuracy that modern cartographers achieved only with the help of satellites. How did a cartographer from the 1500s know this? And if he didn't know, then who did he copy it from? Some alternative researchers believe that civilizations could have moved between continents long before our current understanding of migration. If he was part of a network spanning the Earth, then it's possible that traces of it can really be found in the most unexpected places, where no one is looking. In a private report that leaked online, there was mention of a fragment of an artifact found in an ice cave, made from an unknown alloy, with engraving and undeciphered symbols similar to Egyptian ones. But the artifact disappeared, and all members of the expedition signed a non-disclosure agreement. The Thuringian dagger.
После сильных дождей
In the village of Gütersleben, northern Thuringia, a bronze dagger emerged from the soil. The person who found it didn't pull it out and informed the archaeologists. At the restoration workshop in Weimar, it was confirmed. This is a Bronze Age dagger. It is about 3,500 years old. It's a type with a plate-shaped handle. The wide, flat tang of the blade was attached to the handle with rivets, and the handle was usually made of wood, horn, or bone. The technology for its time was not simple: casting a plate from bronze, forming the edge, polishing at the base of the handle, and making sockets for the rivets. Traces of the rivets on these items reveal how the handle was attached and if the blade could handle the load. Next comes alloy analysis, the proportion of tin and impurities, X-ray, corrosion stabilization. If any organic remains have survived on the handle, it's possible to reconstruct the shape of the grip. The artifact was found without a grave or cultural layer. Most likely, the item was pushed to the surface by shifting karst soil after a rainstorm. In any case, it's a valuable find. It's direct evidence of craftsmanship and trade in the center of Bronze Age Germany. Such daggers could have been both functional weapons, status symbols, or offerings to the earth. The exact scenario will be revealed by the examination. Unauthorized searching is prohibited in the region, and this particular way of reporting a find preserves both the item and the information about it. After the examination, the dagger is planned to be displayed at the Elric Regional Museum. From the field, it will move to a showcase with a clear history of its origin. Mysterious stone pyramids. This discovery was first talked about back then, and in my first videos on the channel, I probably even talked about them. Back then, at the bottom of Lake Bodensee, Located on the border of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, archaeologists found a chain of 170 stone pyramids. They formed a 20-kilometer strip running parallel to the lakeshore, 200 meters away from it. Each pyramid had a diameter of 30 meters and a height of about 2 meters. The pyramids are located on a layer of lake deposits that formed after the retreat of the Rhine Glacier 10,000 years ago. Now, archaeologists have more modern equipment to study ancient objects, especially those located in hard-to-reach places. With the help of an excavator, they excavated one of the pyramids to reach the stone layer. There, they also found wood with traces of rudimentary workmanship. Thanks to this wood, archaeologists were able to at least somehow date the pyramids. So far, there are several theories about how ancient people used the pyramids. These could have been cult structures or a kind of crypt for burying people, but perhaps it's much simpler. They could have been ancient houses or fish traps. The team of archaeologists plans to return to Lake Constance in the near future to study the next stone pyramid. Perhaps this will provide additional information for dating and explaining the functions of the mysterious monuments. We know that archaeologists can accidentally discover something insignificant that could completely explain the origin of the ancient pyramids. Enough with the underwater finds already. Let's instead take a look at the marriage scam in ancient Egypt. A time capsule in a cesspit. Archaeologists from the Netherlands, working in the center of Alkmaar, discovered impressive items in an old cesspit that shed light on everyday life in the 15th century. Among the finds, a pair of wooden shoes made from birch stands out, a tree that is not grown in the country. This is a rare clog which, according to archaeologist Nancy de Jong, has a complex design with a double heel. Only 44 such specimens are known in the Netherlands and Belgium, and most of them are less well preserved. In addition, scientists extracted a finely crafted oak grain measure from the pit. This is a unique artifact, since previously only fragments of such containers had been found in the region. Until now, they were known mainly from historical records. Now, researchers have obtained physical evidence of the existence of such measures in everyday urban life. The cesspit itself dates from 1450 to 1558. At first, it served as a latrine, and then it was abandoned during the construction of new houses. Scientists note that the people of that time were already practicing a circular economy, reusing or recycling materials and often burning waste for heating. Unknown creatures. Sometimes archaeologists find images they can't explain. They are too strange even for mythology. In one of the temples in the Dendera area, figures were noticed on the remains of reliefs that stand out from the usual pantheon. They have disproportionately long arms, large eyes, and heads that resemble drops of water. They are standing in a circle with star symbols above them, and in the center is a person with raised hands, the inscription deliberately erased. This is not an isolated case. In other temples of Egypt, in Edfu, Abydos, figures that do not resemble humans, animals, or gods are also found on the walls of underground tombs. Sometimes they are depicted standing on platforms surrounded by fire, sometimes holding a sphere with rays resembling those of the sun, but clearly technical in nature. One of the most mysterious reliefs, the so-called Dendera lamp, actually looks like a glass container with a cable from which a snake emerges.
Монумент Йонагуні.
Off the coast of Japan, near Yonaguni Island, lies one of the most mysterious underwater objects, the Yonaguni Monument. This massive stone complex was discovered in 1986 by the Japanese diver Kihachiro Aratake. The structure lies at a depth of about 25 meters and resembles giant terraces and platforms, creating the impression of an ancient megalithic complex. The origin of the Yonaguni Monument is still a subject of debate. Some scientists believe that the structure is a natural geological formation that has undergone erosion. However, the symmetry and distinct lines resembling steps and walls lead many researchers to suggest that it is a man-made structure. Supporters of the ancient civilization theory point to possible similarities with other megalithic structures, such as the pyramids of Egypt or the structures in Malta. These hypotheses raise questions about what technologies could have been used to create such structures thousands of years ago. The most intriguing is the hypothesis of extraterrestrial intervention. Some researchers believe that such complex, massive structures could only have been created with the knowledge and technologies passed on by extraterrestrial visitors. The Yonaguni Monument continues to attract the attention of scientists and mystery enthusiasts from all over the world. A boulder from the Ice Age. 31-year-old teacher from Indianapolis, Brandon Douglas, decided to remove a stone that was getting in the way of mowing the lawn near his house. He started digging and realized that the stone didn't end. He carried the soil out in buckets and recorded the process on TikTok. The video went viral and gained over 9 million views. The advice to call a crane turned out to be right. Only with a hoist did it become clear that this was a boulder weighing over 10.3 tons. According to Douglas himself, its age could be 15,000 years dating back to the last ice age. He left the boulder and made it the centerpiece of his yard. He surrounded it with smaller stones, added mulch and soil, and planted native plants. He says he wants to install lighting. Thus, the giant boulder from the Ice Age became a local landmark. In an interview with People, he admitted that working with the boulder forced him to update his yard, and according to his neighbors, it also encouraged others to work on their own yards. From a geological point of view, it's simple. A glacier once brought the stone, and over many years the soil gradually covered it. From a human perspective, it's a rare case when a problem turns into an opportunity to tidy up and leave a mark. The lost city where gold was mined. In the vicinity of Prague, archaeologists have discovered a multi-layered settlement that combines artifacts from the Neolithic, Hallstatt, and Latin cultures, as well as the Middle Ages. More than 9,000 objects have been found, which led to the suspension of road construction. The earliest finds date back to the end of the 6th millennium BC. 8 post-built longhouses, stone tools, and a workshop for processing polished stone. People lived here even later, up to the 5th century BC, as evidenced by 10 semi-subterranean houses from the Hallstatt and Latin periods. Among other artifacts, archaeologists discovered exquisite pottery with rich decoration, a bronze ornament, as well as a handle from a drinking vessel, probably brought from the Adriatic. All this indicates the existence of trade connections with southern regions. Scientists believe that members of the nobility lived in the settlement, having access to rare resources. In addition, researchers discovered several dozen round pits from the 13th century, which they believe are related to gold prospecting or mining. A large medieval gold mine was located nearby. The findings span several eras at once. 3 vanishing artifacts. When engineer Wayman Dixon descended into a narrow passage inside the Great Pyramid in 1872, he hardly expected to stumble upon one of Egypt's strangest mysteries. From deep within a ventilation shaft only a few inches wide, he retrieved 3 objects: a stone ball, a copper hook, and a piece of cedar wood. All of them looked primitive. But that's exactly what raises questions. Why were such items hidden in a hard-to-reach shaft? Who put them there, and how? These finds, later known as the Dixon relics, immediately became surrounded by myths. The stone is perfectly smooth, as if it was carved. The hook, with its strange shape, looks more like a tool than a relic. But the wooden fragment became the most mysterious part of the story. After being transferred to Edinburgh, it disappeared, simply vanished, for decades. Only in the 2020s was a piece of the wood accidentally discovered in a box among forgotten collections. Analysis showed it was over 5,000 years old. It might be older than the pyramid itself. Why is this hardly ever mentioned? Why is no one in a hurry to investigate further? It seems these 3 objects are the key, not to the sarcophagus, but to something more ancient, more frightening, to a secret that the pyramid still hides from us. Hollow Earth, the final door. If someone had told me about this 10 years ago, I would have just laughed. Vikings, Antarctica, the underground world, Nazis who went inside the planet. All of this sounded like crazy science fiction, but the deeper I dive into documents, diaries, and declassified reports, the more I realize this isn't just nonsense. This was part of an ideological construct. According to one theory, the Nazis believed in the existence of a hollow Earth, a space inside the planet where an ancient civilization was preserved. Paradise Agartha, the inner world. The interpretations differ, but the essence is the same. It's supposedly a place of power that escaped destruction and time. There are indeed mentions in the archives of an expedition to Antarctica, planes that disappeared without a trace, and pilots' stories about a mysterious glow that came not from the sky, but from beneath their feet. Some of these ideas may have originated in the Unanswered. Some appeared later, among those who were fleeing. It doesn't matter who came up with them. What matters is how these myths fit into the worldview, not as a fairy tale, but as a refuge. The mystery of the Dropa discs. In 1938, in a remote region of China, in the city of Bayankara-Ula, archaeologists discovered amazing artifacts, the Dropa discs. These discs, made of granite, are about 37 meters in diameter and approximately 1 centimeter thick. They attracted the attention of scientists with their unusual appearance. Each disc contains central holes and carved spiral grooves, resembling grooves used for sound playback. That is, they are similar to vinyl records and may possibly contain the sounds of ancient people, nature, or even something planetary. The most intriguing thing is that the grooves on the discs contain microscopic symbols that resemble hieroglyphs. Researchers claim that these symbols may be a form of ancient writing encoded in the spiral patterns. Translations conducted by some scientists suggest that the discs may tell the story of an ancient civilization known as Dropa, which may have had contact with extraterrestrial beings. According to legend, the Dropa tribe arrived on Earth about 12,000 years ago from a distant star. But unfortunately, almost no artifacts remain from them except for these discs. The Dropa discs remain one of the most mysterious archaeological discoveries, raising many questions about possible contacts between ancient humans and extraterrestrials.
Єгипет і НЛО.
Thousands of years ago, the Egyptians looked up at the sky and, judging by the text, saw more than just stars there. In one of the papyri attributed to Pharaoh Thutmose III, a strange incident is described. A disk of fire that appeared in the air emitted light, hovered motionless, and then soared upward. This text, found in the temple archive, was long considered an allegory until it was compared with modern descriptions of UFOs. On the walls of some tombs, there were symbols that could not be explained through mythology. Round objects with rays, figures floating in the air, strange capsules over which priests were bending. They are not the center of attention, but always somewhere nearby, as if they were part of everyday life or a source of fear. The Egyptians believed that knowledge came from the sky, not metaphorically, but literally. Thoth, the god of wisdom, descended in the form of an ibis, but many texts describe him as shining from a heavenly boat. Osiris came down on a ray of light. Even the term Necheru, which we translate as gods, literally means those who came. Is it a coincidence or a memory of something that once happened? If even part of these coincidences are not fantasies, then perhaps Egypt was not isolated from civilization. It was a beacon for those who came from outside, or for those who were meant to return one day. We are used to thinking of Egypt as the beginning, but maybe it is, on the contrary, the end, the completion of something great, forgotten, buried beneath the layers of time. And if that's true, then everything we know about history begins with those whose names have not even survived. And everything we see today is only what they allowed us to find. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Goodbye, everyone.